All right, welcome back to Consistency Please after a, I don't know, year-long hiatus, whatever. Let's get into it. Here's something I want to talk about that has bothered me for a long time, and when things bother me, it's time for me to rant about them on my channel. So, I hear people often complain about bias in the media. The media is biased. It's all fake news. They twist the facts, they report lies, and so on and so on and so on. And interestingly, I hear this from both sides of the aisle. I hear conservatives say this about what they often describe as mainstream media, and I hear liberals say this about right-wing or alternative media, whatever, Fox News, Newsmax, I don't know, alternative media on radio and YouTube and whatever. The same people who complain about media being biased will often find stories and reports and fact checks that come from media. Specific media, websites they look at, news organizations, cable news networks, whatever. They give me media to show me that media is biased. Media they probably agree with in some ways, who share assumptions that resonate with them, that cover stories that they want to hear about, and they don't see the tension in this thinking. This happens both with conservatives and liberals, or Republicans and Democrats. Not that those two things line up perfectly, but I see it on both sides of the aisle. I see this. Really, I see most people doing this. But there is an inherent tension in this. The reasons people often cite as to why media is biased, well, there are a couple of them. One of them is that this media X or whatever is beholden to financial incentives. In some way, they have to please their advertisers. They want to make money. They want to please their corporate owners or overlords. So they report stories, they cover stories, they spin stories in ways that go towards that end. Or sometimes it's thought that these news organizations just have a certain ideology. They have a certain perspective. The different hosts and the authors and whatever, they come at things with a certain set of values, a certain ideological perspective, and because of that, filter things, ignore facts, twist things, and so on. Just manifest various aspects of bias. But once you see the explanation that people offer for why, whatever, media boogeyman X is biased, you should be able to see that those same reasons, those same factors can be at play basically with any media, including media that you happen to agree with, that you happen to watch, that you consume. So for any media, there could be a financial incentive to say certain things, to report certain things. There are donors who give to media organizations. There are demographics that they want to capture. There are clicks that they want people to click. They can just be looking for clickbait, looking for money, trying to get that story, that sensationalized angle that will get people to watch. I mean, people love things that are sensationalized. They hate things that are boring and, I don't know, just straight news. They don't like that stuff. So there's a financial incentive, pretty much regardless of the ideological perspective and regardless of the news organization. And of course, any news organization can be subject to ideological capture, can be beholden to a certain ideology, have a certain perspective, frame things a certain way. And this can be overt. This can be something they wear in their sleeve or that can manifest in very clear ways, like just literally making up stories or reporting things that are demonstrably false. But it can also be more subtle. It can be failing to cover certain things. It can be framing things in a way that aren't technically false, but that heavily imply something that is at least questionable. There's just so many different ways that news organizations can be biased. And I don't think this just applies to what are often seen as hard right and hard left news organizations. I think even news organizations like NPR that are supposedly centrist or neutral, not that those are the same thing, can also be biased. The bias there is usually more subtle, and it's actually not clear to me which kind of bias is worse, whether the subtle bias is worse or overt bias is worse. But at any rate, I think this can pretty much apply to any news organization. Now, does this mean I think all news organizations are equally good? No, I don't think that. I mean, I have my own views about which news organizations I think stick closer to the facts or that have the least ideology superimposed over what they report. Or at least if they're ideological, they are forthright with their ideology and they try to incorporate different perspectives. There are better and worse news organizations, but even those aren't going to be perfect. We have to make our judgment calls. But what's certainly not going to be the case, the organizations that totally disagree with us are all biased, and the organizations that totally agree with us are unbiased. There is almost no way that that's going to be true. That is just way too convenient. Reality is not going to be that kind to you, and you have to exercise a lot more critical thinking than that would allow. So I just think consistency here demands that we look at the motivations behind news organizations being biased, and we see that they apply just as much to those organizations whose reporting we don't like as they apply to those organizations whose reporting we do like. Almost certainly this is the case. It just means that, you have to be careful who you trust. You have to read as widely as you can, and it's not going to all be carved out really simply for you. So let's just be more judicious in our consumption of media and in our accusations of media bias, or at the very least, let's be as willing to apply them to news organizations that say things and report things and have newscasters that we don't like, as we apply to those that have newscasters and report things and have certain slants that we do like. That, I think, is the only consistent way to be a responsible media consumer. And with that, I'm glad to be back. Hopefully I can continue this on a more regular basis, and hopefully you like this a little somewhat more impromptu format. At any rate, let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you next time.